Mr. Speaker, sir, may I join the Right Honourable Gentleman, the Leader of the Opposition, in congratulating my honourable friends who moved and seconded the humble address. My honourable friend, the member for Newcastle North, has represented his constituency for some 22 years, and it is a matter of great pride with him that he has always taken part in every debate on northeastern matters. The matters which he raised, particularly unemployment in his own region, are ones upon which he has occasion to know the heritage left by this present government. And I share his views that at this election campaign a very large number of young people came our way and supported the Conservative cause, believing it was the only one that would give them the opportunity for the future. I very much enjoyed the speech of my honourable friend, the member for St Marylebone. I must say, if he's going to do contributions of that very high quality, I'm extremely glad that he's retired from the bowling at Prime Minister's question time. I listened very carefully to his right and left and concluded from some of his remarks that he must consider that I myself am in the extreme centre. I shall watch with great interest the success with which he treads the straight and narrow path between rebellion and sycophancy, but I'm sure he'll be extremely successful. Now, the Right Honourable Gentleman... after one or two remarks at the expense of my Right Honourable and Honourable friends, returned to customary hostilities. I might point out that, as he agreed, there are in our party a lot of outstanding members on the back benches. I wondered from what the Right Honourable Gentleman said if he was short of them. I listened carefully to what the Right Honourable Gentleman said on various matters of foreign affairs, as of course one listens to the advice of any previous Prime Minister. But the Right Honourable Gentleman will expect me to take a similar course of action as Prime Minister to that which he took, namely to consider the matters afresh and to bring one's own judgment to bear upon them. I'm sure that that's what he did, and that is exactly what we shall do on the very serious matters that he raised. He particularly asked me about the question of continuing the existing programme for overseas aid. He will know full well that when a new government comes in and looks at the public expenditure commitments, very, very few programmes are exempt from that search, and I must be absolutely candid, as is my custom, this programme is not exempt. But I must also remind the Right Honourable Gentleman that his programmes led to the biggest borrowing that this country has ever known. And has left the biggest debt round the necks of our children of any government to repay. And that the amount spent in interest on public debt this year is more, in fact, than the amount that will be spent on either the education programme or the health programme. That is the Right Honourable Gentleman's legacy. He also commented that perhaps my Right Honourable friend, the Chancellor, was looking just a little bit mournful. Of course, if he is, it's because of the very great problems which the Right Honourable Gentleman's government left us to solve, including the large numbers of post-dated cheques. Of course I expect the Right Honourable Gentleman to continue to put the case in which he believes. But I must gently remind him that it did suffer a very severe defeat at the hands of the electorate, who thought it was a time for change, for new policies. And I note a number of Right Honourable and Honourable members opposite dashing into print as to their reasons for the cause for the defeat they suffered. And I saw that the Right Honourable Gentleman, the member for Stockton-on-Tees, wrote in The Guardian yesterday And when referring to the flayed the left, I believe he had every justification for flaying the left. I'm grateful to the honourable member. The right honourable gentleman wrote this of his own party. The party in opposition must offer a more positive appeal, especially if it is to capture the middle ground of politics. Well, I think it's a pity that he did not have a word about that with his own leader before the election. Because if he had, his own leader might not have fought his entire campaign on a negative attack on Conservative policies. But in any case, I welcome and agree with the implication of the remark by the right honourable gentleman. The Conservative Party has captured, and it now occupies the middle ground of politics. And we do so because we're offering people what they want. We're offering the people of this country the policies they instinctively favour and desire. Well, may the right honourable gentleman, the member for Stockton, ask, what is wrong with choice and diversity? Why should enterprise and opportunity be dirty words? I will tell him, there's nothing whatever wrong with choice and diversity. They are central to Conservative policies, and they are precisely what Britain wants and needs. And enterprise and opportunity have become dirty words in the Labour Party because the opposition has allowed socialist ideology to blot out both common sense and the economic realities of life. But far from stamping out enterprise and opportunity, we shall foster and increase them because we know that without them the economy will wither and die. And when the right honourable gentleman finally continued in his article, above all, the Labour Party has let the idea of freedom be filched, we agree with him. But was that not part of the strategy of so many of his honourable friends? Steadily to increase the power of the state and erode that of the individual? Gradually to substitute the politician's judgment about what the people should have for what the people themselves really wanted? Hence the higher tax they introduced, hence the higher public expenditure at the expense of private, hence increasing state ownership, hence increasingly detailed controls through employment and prices legislation, hence the determination to keep people renting council houses rather than owning them. But then all of a sudden, the people rumbled what was happening, that the conscientious citizen under Labour was not getting a fair deal, that people weren't going to achieve their ambition of home ownership from a government dedicated to extending its power over their lives. That public ownership was a misnomer. They didn't own any of the nationalised industries and couldn't get at those who ran them. That people got a better deal from competition than from state monopoly. That Britain's economic decline had something to do with the fact that the skilled weren't getting fair differentials and the exceptionally talented were not allowed fair rewards. And that the full magnitude of our decline has been concealed by North Sea oil. They also knew that you can't sufficiently help the unfortunate members of society unless you give sufficient opportunity to the able. And so the choice before the people was to take further strides in the direction of the corporatist, all-powerful state, or to restore the balance in favour of the individual. The Labour Party stood for the former. We offered the latter. The difference is clear-cut because we steadily put it across during the campaign. It was indeed a watershed election, and the result was decisive. With a difference of some 2 million votes between the two major parties, the largest difference since 1935. Mr. Speaker, sir, the gracious speech sets out some of the policies designed to implement the views we expounded during the election. I will examine the proposals under 5 different heads. First, to restore the economic balance of society. Second, to restore choice. Third, the law and order provisions. Fourth, constitutional matters. And fifth, overseas and defence. I start under the first head with restoring the economic balance. We start from a very poor base. For almost 4 years, there have been well over 1 million unemployed, sometimes as many as 1.5 million. And recent improvements offer no hope of long-term recovery. Indeed, many job creation schemes are temporary. The problem is of creating not new artificial jobs, but of genuine new jobs. But over the last 5 years, the economy has hardly grown at all. Prices, to which the Right Honourable Gentleman made mention in his speech, have more than doubled, and inflation is in double figures once again. But may I remind him that an inflation rate of 10% now is 10% on double the prices that existed 5 years ago. Now, how is society to be improved? By millions of people resolving that they will give their own children a better life than they had themselves. This is the true driving force of society, the desire of the individual to do better for himself and his family. And for too long, individuals have been unable to benefit their families sufficiently from the fruits of their own efforts. And that truth pervades all too many areas of our national life. It affects management's willingness to take on responsibility. It reduces the readiness of businessmen to bear extra risk. And just as serious, Mr. Speaker, are the consequences for those at the bottom of the income scale, where an extra pound earned can be lost in tax and the withdrawal of means-tested benefits. During the campaign, the Right Honourable Gentleman tried to give the impression that our tax reliefs would benefit only those in high-income groups. I wonder if he really knows how many people on very low wages and pensions bear quite a high burden of tax. Because if he doesn't, they do. He doesn't, they do. I well remember coming across one person during one of the walkabouts I did, a pensioner, a lady. Some of the honourable members kept more contact with real people. They might have had better policy. A widowed pensioner, aged 64, with an income of some £25 a week, paying under a Labour government £1.15 per week in income tax. That is the kind of person who will benefit from the reduction in our tax policies, as well as the need to give incentives all the way up the scale. Yes to those on low earnings, yes to those on differentials, yes to those on management earnings. All of those we will hope to benefit from the reduction in direct tax. Because our present system of taxation seems almost to have been designed to discourage extra work, extra skill, and extra responsibility. And it means that people have preferred to reduce their tax bill by working less hard, rather than to increase their earnings by working harder. And the first important step in restoring incentives is to reduce the excessive burden of direct taxation. My right honourable and learned friend, the Chancellor, will make a start when he introduces his budget 4 weeks today on June the 12th. In the meantime, I can give my firm assurance that we regard a reduction of income tax as an objective of the highest priority. Further, the government will do everything possible to encourage free enterprise, particularly the small business sector, which is the source of genuine new jobs. And our policies, unlike theirs, will be founded on a firm belief in the need to promote profits and profitability, because profits are the main stimulus to enterprise and the key source of funds for new investment and new jobs. So, Mr. Speaker, we shall bring forward measures to amend those parts of the Employment Protection Act which discourage firms from creating new jobs. We shall bring forward measures to reduce the damaging consequences of existing price controls and measures to increase competition. We shall introduce proposals to increase the powers of the Director General of Fair Trading and the Monopolies and Mergers Commission, so that they can deal with prices in conditions where competition is limited. Proposals to enable
the Price Commission, when it looks at a monopoly, takes about 3 months to do so. The Monopolies Commission, when it looks at monopoly, takes about 3 years to do so. How does she square abolishing the Price Commission with a greater degree of competition? Surely it will mean less.
The honourable gentleman makes a very good case for strengthening the Monopolies Commission. I'm surprised he didn't do it. We shall introduce proposals designed to enable the Director General of Fair Trading to examine the abuse of monopoly power by nationalised industries. We've carried out a review of the workings of the Price Commission. Its impact on inflation has been negligible, as is shown by the doubling of prices under the previous government. We believe that the Price Commission has destroyed jobs and new investment, as well as imposing extra burdens on industry. The bill, which puts forward proposals for strengthening competition, will also provide for the abolition of the Price Commission. And my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Trade, will be giving further details shortly. But, Mr. Speaker, we're concerned not only to see that we have a healthy free enterprise sector, but also with increasing its size. Too narrow a base for wealth-creating part of the economy will restrict the growth of the economy as a whole. We shall make a start in extending the role of free enterprise by reducing the size of the public sector, and it needs reducing, and by making economies in public spending. We shall examine the role of the National Enterprise Board. We shall require it to dispose of certain holdings in profitable companies. My right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Industry, will bring forward proposals to amend the Industry Act 1975 during this session, and we see no justification for extending public ownership through the National Enterprise Board into profitable areas of manufacturing industry. I turn, Mr. Speaker, to the second theme, that of restoring choice to the individual, a choice which has been progressively diminished during the lifetime of the last government. A choice which many, many people wish to see returned, whether it be choice over how their own money is spent. A number of people said during the election campaign, at least your party, the Conservative Party, gives people choice. That's quite different from the other party. More choice in housing, more choice in education, and some choice in health. May I turn first to housing? Thousands and thousands of people in council houses and new towns came out to support us for the first time because they wanted the chance to buy their own home. We will give to every council tenant the right to purchase his own home at a substantial discount of market price and with a 100% mortgage for those who need it. This will be a giant stride towards making a reality of Anthony Eden's dream of a property-owning democracy. And it'll do something else. It will give to more of our people that freedom and mobility, that prospect of handing something on to their children and grandchildren, which owner-occupation provides. We'll also give council tenants who don't wish to buy their homes but want to go on renting additional rights and safeguards. And we shall take action to halt the decline of the privately rented sector. Our new concept of short-hold tenure will encourage new letting of empty property. We'll also take steps to tackle the land shortage for new building. We'll speed up and simplify the planning system, and we shall repeal the Community Land Act. So we shall substantially increase the choice in housing. Choice in education. Another very important election issue, particularly in crowded urban areas, where the main worry of many parents was how to get a good education for their children, and many felt that they weren't getting it. We shall end as quickly as possible all the measures taken by the last administration to force local education authorities to reorganize their schools on comprehensive lines. Those who still have grammar schools, technical schools, smaller secondary schools may choose to keep them. Those who wish to stay comprehensive will also be free to do so. But they'll have the choice, and they'll have the freedom, and the parents will have the choice. Because we shall ensure that parents' wishes are taken into account as far as possible in the choice of schools for their children. At least we shall enlarge the freedom. Honourable gentlemen on the other side have tried to reduce it. Although the education service is often described as being free, it's really hardly free at all, because it has to be paid for out of our tax-paying and rate-paying pockets, and the cost is significant. The average yearly cost of educating a child in primary school is now £324. In a secondary school for children below 16, it's £455, and in the sixth forms, £800 per pupil. The education service must be truly accountable to the parents' and the taxpayers' wishes, and we shall see that it is so. We shall also extend the principle of choice in education by introducing a scheme to help talented children from less well-off homes to attend certain fee-paying schools. Their abilities entitle them to an education suited to their talents, and they should not be denied it because of dogma. And we shall fight to improve educational standards. We shall have to make better use of our resources, and schools will need to have clear aims and pursue them with vigour. Greater choice and higher standards, those will be our aims in the education service. We shall also work to improve the use of resources in the National Health Service and to simplify its administration. Mr. Speaker, I expected that. The other side have been complaining about it for 5 years and have done absolutely nothing about it. Also, Mr. Speaker, I have great sympathy for the cause of small local hospitals and hospitals with a special role like the Elizabeth Garrett Anderson Hospital. Here again, there is no such thing as a free service in the health service, and it must be made more responsive to the needs of the patients. And so in those ways we shall extend choice and diversity which have been diminished during the lifetime of the last government.
Douglas. I'm very grateful to the Right Honourable Lady for giving way. She was talking earlier about real people. On Saturday, one of my constituents came to me in relation to choice in the health service. And she told me that a provision of a wheelchair for her husband, which had been prescribed for him, was frozen, awaiting the decisions of her government. Would she like to tell me how I should reply to my constituent in terms of choice?
I'm astonished the honourable gentleman did not get his constituent one before the election. Isn't it amazing that he should complain just afterwards? I turn now to the third head, freedom under the law. In recent years, the government has tried to do too much it shouldn't do and failed to do what it should do. The people must be able to look to the state for protection from crime. Otherwise, the whole basis of free society is in danger. They should also be able to look to governments to support the judges in their decisions. So the battle against crime will be pursued with relentless vigour and with total commitment. And that's why the very first action of the new government was to implement immediately and in full the recommendations of the Edmund Davis Committee on Police Pay. That was an earnest of our intention to back the police in the war against crime. We must have a strong and experienced police force. We shall also bring forward proposals for strengthening the powers of the courts to deal with young offenders. Now,
Very much obliged. I wonder whether she is going to come to what is an extraordinary omission both in her manifesto and in the Queen's speech. about the problems of the inner city, and in particular, would she describe what are her proposals with regard to the existing partnership schemes? Are they to be enlarged, as I believe is absolutely necessary, or what?
Whatever the honourable gentleman's policies on inner cities, they clearly have not been successful. They clearly have not been successful. I have been talking for several minutes about small business, vital to inner cities, about education, vital to inner cities, about health service, vital to inner cities, about housing, vital to inner cities, and it is those policies which are far more likely to revivify the inner cities than the ones of subsidy, without consulting sufficiently the local people, which the honourable gentleman's government was following.
I would like to press the Right Honourable Lady on this issue of inner city policy. And does she not recognise that it is quite wrong to suggest that the policy that was initiated a year or a few months ago, to suggest that it, because we haven't seen results yet, is really not to give a proper judgment on a whole range of policies which the last government initiated?
The Right Honourable Gentleman's government has been in power for about 11 out of the last 15 years. His policies have had a very, very good time to be tested. And yet in those inner cities, very good time to be tested. Where you find poverty in inner cities, there you will find you've had socialist government for many, many years. Perhaps because the honourable member's policies didn't give sufficient care and attention to the personal freedom and dignity of individuals, but tried to impose the will of the state upon them when they wanted something totally different. Under this heading of the rule of law, I would like to deal with some of the law and trade unions which the Right Honourable Gentleman raised. We accept that a strong and responsible trade union movement must play a big part in our economic recovery. Government and public, management and unions, employers and employees all have a common interest in raising production, productivity and profits and improving real living standards for everyone. The crippling industrial disruption which hit Britain last winter under the last government had several causes. Years with little growth in production, rigid pay controls ending, high marginal rates of taxation, and the extension of trade union power and privileges through the two acts of 1974 and 1976 passed by the last government. We shall introduce a bill to make 3 changes in the existing law. First, the right to picket will be limited to those in dispute picketing at their own place of work. Second, we shall amend the law on the closed shop so that those arbitrarily excluded or expelled from any union are given the right of appeal to a court of law, a right which the last government took away from them. Existing employees and those with personal convictions against joining a union will be protected. If they lose their jobs as a result of the closed shop, they will be entitled to full compensation which they did not get under the last government. And thirdly, we shall provide public funds for postal ballots for union elections and other important decisions. Every trade unionist should be free to record his decision without others being able to watch or take note. We believe that the great majority of trade unionists will support these changes overwhelmingly. The Right Honourable Gentleman made...
Could the Prime Minister tell us, in that case, whether she's dropped the proposal for robbing the families of people on strike of social security benefits, which was opposed, as she knows, by the Organisation of Conservative Trade Unionists and was castigated some years ago by her Right Honourable friend, the member for North East Leeds, as conveying the image of Mr Gradgrind and Mr Bumble?
No one proposed to rob families in the ex-Chancellor's language. We are entitled to expect the union funds of those who go on strike to make a bigger contribution while their people are on strike, as they do in many other countries. That proposal is not specified in this particular gracious speech. This is the gracious speech for 1 year. There will be 4 other years, and even then, in case the right honourable gentleman should try to circumscribe us as to when we could go any further, anything we do would be covered in the famous other measures will be laid before you. But these that I have given are specific undertakings which my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Employment, is pursuing with the unions and which he hopes to introduce in a bill before Christmas. In these ways we will restore the balance between the power and responsibilities of trade unions.
Order. I don't think the Right Honourable Lady is giving way any more. Oh, she has.
I'm most grateful to the Right Honourable Lady. Would the Right Honourable Lady define for us where is the place of work of a lorry driver?
I have given some considerable thought to that, but I believe that the legislation itself could in fact define it. I know exactly what the honourable gentleman is suggesting, that the lorry is an extension of the premises. That would depend upon whether the legislation referred to premises and premises only. I doubt very much whether the premises could be construed as a lorry. But as we've not even got doubtless in fact, the honourable member will take some considerable part in this legislation. As the bill hasn't even come before us yet, I doubt whether he can consider that every single thing is already defined.
Well, you said so.
No. I am a tax lawyer. An adventure in the nature of trade was never defined in tax law. It didn't prevent the courts from defining it. I turn now to constitutional matters, about which the right honourable gentleman had something to say. We shall ask Parliament to approve the orders repealing the Scotland Act and the Wales Act. We shall do nothing to jeopardise the unity of the kingdom. We shall initiate all-party discussions aimed at bringing government in Scotland closer to the people, and we shall give Parliament an opportunity to consider ways of improving its scrutiny of Welsh affairs. Mr. Speaker, the gracious speech sets out the government's objectives for Northern Ireland. We shall maintain the union between Great Britain and Northern Ireland for as long as that is the wish of the majority of the people in the province. We shall give the strongest possible support to the security forces in combating terrorism and bringing before the courts those responsible for criminal activities. And there will be no amnesty for convicted terrorists. Politically, the government's most urgent task is to find a way of restoring to democratically elected representatives of the people of Northern Ireland a substantial measure of control over their own affairs. This will not be easy, as we all know, but it is an aim that we must pursue. Now I turn to defence and overseas matters. On defence, we give priority to defence because security is essential to our survival as a free nation. The quality of any system of defence depends first on the troops who man it. That's why we pay tribute to the men and women in our forces and the job they do for us all. And that's why in our first days of office, we fulfilled our promise to bring up their pay to the level recommended by the Armed Forces Pay Review Body. This will go a long way to stop the critical outflow of skilled manpower from the services. Now, despite the pressure on our resources and our determination to control government expenditure, we shall affirm Britain's commitment to NATO. We shall ensure that the British nuclear forces, like their American and French counterparts, remain a factor which can't be ignored in the calculations of any potential aggressor. Now, I'm glad that the Right Honourable Gentleman noted what I said on Europe, I noted that he'd been complaining a great deal about the terms he renegotiated and how he'd handled them during the last 5 years. We believe that a strong Britain and a strong Europe can play a crucial part in the whole future of the West. And as I explained to our German partners recently, we see no contradiction between a vigorous and effective membership of the European community and vigorous and effective pursuit of Britain's interests within the community. And I'm sure that other countries have the same approach. There's nothing wrong in finding that after a certain number of years, policies need to be changed to meet new circumstances, or that anomalies which flow from them need to be corrected. But such necessary changes must be made by agreement amongst the member governments. But in making them, Mr. Speaker, we shall not undermine the community. We shall make it better able to serve the common interest and to be fair, just and reasonable to all its members. The Right Honourable Gentleman referred to the problem of Rhodesia, and I would like to address some remarks to that very serious problem. The government welcomes the major change that has taken place in Rhodesia as a result of the recent elections and the emergence of an African majority government. It's our objective to build on that change, to achieve a return to legality in conditions which secure wide international recognition. We have sent a senior foreign and Commonwealth official to Salisbury this week to have discussions with Bishop Muzorewa. We shall need to consult many people in the coming days and weeks, including, of course, our own partners in the Nine and in the Commonwealth. The United States government must be one of the first in view of their involvement in the Rhodesian question. And I'm therefore particularly glad that Mr. Vance will be here next week for talks with my noble friend, the Foreign and Commonwealth Secretary. I've seen my noble friend Lord Boyd following his return from leading a group of observers at the Rhodesian elections. He and his colleagues are completing their report, and I expect to receive it tomorrow. We shall hope to publish it. We must and will recognise the realities of the present situation in Rhodesia. We must and will take into account the wider international implications. I assure the House that we intend to proceed with vigour to resolve this issue. Mr. Speaker, the programme I've outlined of measures in both domestic and foreign policy is a programme for action for a 17-month session of Parliament. Our priorities are to restore the balance in our economy, to restore the balance between the individual and the state, to promote the freedom of the individual under the rule of law, and to defend our interests wherever they are challenged. These are the policies we submitted to the people. The path we now take is the path the people have chosen. Yeah!